Welcome back to the Links Golf Club podcast, everyone, your weekly live show about our wonderful club and the world of golf. This week, we're breaking down the biggest stories in golf and then taking a deep dive into the life and legacy of Donald Ross, the legendary architect behind Hillcrest Country Club. I'm Gregory, and I'm joined, as always, by Cooper, Chris. We got Bossie in the back. Let's bring everybody in. Gentlemen, how y'all feeling today?
There's a slow burn start there. Like it.
I realized
switching it up on us.
That our editor, me, is annoyed by how it clips at the beginning. So I'm trying to keep it at an acceptable level there. So we're gonna figure out how to down. We're gonna try to figure out how to, equal those up.
Excellent. Feeling good, guys. Feeling good. I went from completely out of sorts with my golf swing to feeling like I'm the king of the world yesterday. Shot one over on the back. So I'm trending right now over here, just in time for the season to shut down and not be able to play anymore.
What do you attribute that to?
Honestly, I wish I knew. Then if I knew that, then I would, then I'd have something. But no, just had good swing thought going, good feel. Felt control of the golf ball. But yeah, I mean, it's so funny. I think we talked about this last time. I was like, went from being completely in the wilderness to completely in control. But that's just golf, I guess.
Yeah. Last night on Sim, I played Lofoten twice. I was, and by the way, from the kind of forward tees, just basically trying to maximize hitting a good iron shot, hitting a good wedge shot, right? And I think I was 12 over on the first one, and I was like, all right, I hit everything perfectly center this way, just right down the bottom of the iron. Just could not figure out how to get it to go a little bit higher. And then I think it was 2 under on the second go around. So same guy, same course, same clubs, very different outcomes. I don't get it. It's maddening.
Player B is undefeated. I had a similar experience in chat. I want to hear your largest disparity between nines or between 18-hole rounds. I went out and played one of my local courses from the tips, from the black tees, and shot a clean 90 as a 7 handicap.
Clean 90.
Yeah, just super clean 9-0. And then subsequently went out and played with a friend from the whites and shot a 77. Yep. So back to back, just had it recently and then prior did not. It was a weird feeling to go out there and have such a good round after a bad round. It's like I forgot how to play golf. And it's like, nope, I remembered. So
you should play from the reds. Maybe you'll shoot sub 70.
Sub 50. I could break 50 with Bryson. That'd be good.
I did 2 weeks ago over a weekend golf trip. I did 84, 89. 79, 96. So
solid.
79, 96 is a great spread.
Yeah. It is what it is. One thing I want to mention, we put out a video yesterday, a short. We're doing some of these shorts, sort of Hillcrest history minutes. I just got to put another word in for Jill Conley. When we started doing the research, so the kind of way it works is you look through these newspaper archives and you can search keywords, right? So you're searching Hillcrest Country Club and going all the way back to the first time it was mentioned. And there's, sort of the famous article we have on the website about Donald Ross saying it'd be the finest course in the world. And it talks through him coming out there. And, then you can go through, they bought the property and formed the club and started working on it, installed the sprinkler system and all this stuff. But this Jill Conley dude just keeps coming up. So I want to do searches just on Jill Conley. And I was talking to y'all on Slack on Friday as we were putting the video together. And it's a wild ride, right? He just imagine being, obviously it's a different time, right? But being so good at your home club that you're written about at least 15 times in your city's newspaper of record. You're such a problem that when you move, people celebrate because they want to be able to have a chance to win. Then it's news when you might come back to play in a tournament. Then you do come back and you win that tournament. And then we found out, we thought he died 2 years later, but actually his wife passed away, which shows up in the New York Times archives. And then, it's just unbelievable, that time frame. and I'm very excited to like kind of push forward through the 20s, 30s, 40s, and 50s on this exercise, because it's just a really historic club, and there's a lot of obviously members. You think about like Chick Evans, you think about like Varden and all these big names that played there, but like GL Conley is just like, one of us. Like they're just crushing it. I love him very much. I want to
menace.
He was a menace.
I think we should get back to a time where the ratio of like people to newspapers and sports writers was where it was. I feel like there was just one sports writer for like every golf course, at that time.
Yeah.
A lot of newspaper, a lot of column inches to fill.
Yeah. Slightly different media environment 110 years ago.
A little bit.
Slightly.
A little bit. It reminds me of like there was a website in high school that would cover like our high school football team. Like it was just like a dad who did it, and it was like it felt like the biggest deal in the world, because they do like little write-ups in the Tennessean, right? Like game results and box score or whatever. But like this guy would like go deep. He'd do interviews, and he would cover it like he was a sports writer, and he'd do like opinion pieces and like call people out. And it was awesome. It felt like the biggest thing in the world at that point. And like 15 people read it, Another thing we have, like, just want to say rest in peace, Beef. Obviously like it's the YouTube golf stuff. If you watch a lot of it, you start to like really kind of get to know these people, right? And it's people throw around parasocial relationships a lot, and you just like start to have these parasocial relationships with people you've never met and never will meet. But by all accounts, seemed like really great guy, and it was pretty sudden, pretty tragic passing. So just want to mention rest in peace, Beef. There's if any of us had the ability after we pass away to see all the nice things that people say about us, it would be really heartwarming. And it's just like the outpouring, even from like Barstool haters, and like just like resolutely the PGA of America, all the way through the burner accounts, all the way through everyone, is just like the consensus is he was a really good dude. So very sad.
Yeah, I had the same observation. I mean, I can't claim to have, known him or known much about him, but like it was kind of an overwhelmingly positive, heartwarming response, like you were saying. It was kind of wild to see. So yeah, RIP. This life is short. Take advantage of the time we have here.
That's right. Yeah. And I think I haven't watched the full Internet Invitational yet. I think we're going to dip into that later, but I think I saw that he hit the first tee shot of that. So, definitely RIP, and a loss for online golf.
And I think they handled that really well too. Is like they pushed back when they debuted it to kind of give it a day, and then they had a kind of, we're going to talk about the Internet Invitational later, but the Barstool guys, who obviously were close with him, did sort of a very heartfelt like intro to it. So when commerce and internet and all this stuff kind of connects, it's hard to thread the needle on how to talk about it. But it was pretty raw, but like there are a lot of fans of his, and I think they did a good job. So speaking of awkward sort of commerce transitions, it's time to get to an ad read here. Chris, why don't you talk about the stack system, how we get faster?
Yeah, let's talk a little bit about the stack system. Stack system, of course, is golf's #1 speed training system. They have the data to prove it, with over 60,000 users, 40 million swings tracked, and an average gain of 27 plus yards in distance potential. It's used by pros like Matt Fitzpatrick in advance of his U.S. Open win. A ton of pros across the board are using it, even the ones that aren't kind of official sponsors or sponsored by the stack. So it's a really kind of well-known, well-regarded system. It's an all-in-one system with training club, weights, integrated swing speed radar, award-winning app, and a wealth of training programs to fit every golfer. This is very timely right now because, as we talked about last time, we are doing a stack speed challenge this winter for those of us. So whether you're in a warm climate, cold climate, those of us in cold climates can get some training in over the winter. Those of us in warm climates can get some training in while you're still able to play. But we're doing a challenge starting November 15th. So got to get your stack system set up and get a baseline registered by the 15th, so in a couple weeks here. And then we're going to do a little competition over the winter to see who can gain the most speed as registered by the Stack program. So it's to make sure you have a Stack system in advance of that date. It's basically the last chance this week. Get your orders in, get ready to go, and it's going to be a fun ride going along this winter. Have you guys? You haven't started yet, right? You haven't registered your baseline.
Nope, I'm waiting until we kick off. But I need it. Like you said, like the cruising speed, feel good about the cruising speed. But yeah, I'd love. Who wouldn't? But I'd love to be able to see some results in that cruising speed going up, because we've got a lot more accurate. We've helped the dispersion a bunch, but hopefully next year we can. I was having an interesting conversation with my coach, because he was like, I kind of right now I'm struggling with the 3-wood of like, is it really needed? Because like, I hit the 2-iron off the tee now, I don't hit the 3-wood. And he had a very interesting perspective of like the impact that speed is going to have on the usefulness of those higher end clubs. Because he's like, well, yeah, like if right now it doesn't make a lot of sense because you're hitting your driver X, but if you could get another 15 yards on that driver, then that puts something very different in play. So there's carryover effect on all this stuff. But we started new workout routine last week, trying to get stronger, trying to get faster, and trying to get more flexible. And then we'll apply the Stack system in a couple of weeks when we kick off. So I'm very, very excited for that.
Yeah, I definitely am really stoked to get back into the Stack system. When I was using it last year, when my handicap just started dropping, like I attribute Arcos, Stack, and playing golf with Lynx members like the 3 best things I've done for my game. And then just swinging with it and getting more used to that body movement to generate power, and not feeling like I'm using my arms. I have that baseball swing and throw kind of action that I need to get out of a habit of and use the big muscles. So you mentioned flexibility, Greg. I think that's going to have to go hand in hand with the Stack, because just adding power isn't always the key. And that flexibility can open up more speed. And that's why there's that awesome intro video before you do every session, right? You get the leg kicks and all the stretching out. So I think all of that's going to be a great thing to be doing here as temperatures drop. Should see some results next season.
Totally. And it's super easy to do, basically just twice a week for 30 minutes. You can do it in your backyard, do it in a sim, do it on the driveway, whatever, in the basement. So really easy setup. So we've got the challenge going. Get your Stack system ordered, get a baseline in before November 15th. Share your code with us so we can add you to the stable of golfers where we're tracking the competition. And so if you need to order the Stack system, go to thestacksystem.com/linksdao/LINKSDAO. That'll get you 10% off. And if you're a Lynx member, make sure to navigate to the clubhouse. Go to the clubhouse in the benefits section, because you get a little extra benefit. You can get 20% off the Stack Radar, the bundle with everything together, everything you need for your speed training this summer. So make sure to check that out. And I have to say, guys, I just did the Stack putting program for the first 2 times over the past week. We've been talking a lot about the speed training, but they have both wedging and putting programs, which are basically, just kind of different versions of the same thing, right? It's getting a lot of data to help you be really data driven to improve your game. And hey, not gonna draw a direct, causation effect here, but did that a couple rounds, and then, as I said, just flipped the script on the trend of my index, and posted a 1 over on the back 9, which is very good for me this past round. So now can't say that's the only cause. Maybe it was, maybe it wasn't, but certainly helping. So beyond just the speed training, some really awesome stuff they have going with putting and wedging and everything else. So thestacksystem.com/linksdao, go check it out, get your Stack ordered and baseline set before the 15th. Get going with the challenge this winter, and we're going to have a lot of fun.
Awesome stuff. Awesome stuff. Couple more announcements here before we get deeper into the discussion. I know we're going to talk about Donald Ross here in a second, but I do want to cover that we have, I think, 3 or 4 spots left at the Tree Farm event coming up here in November. Really, really exciting golf course. A lot of news, a lot of hype about this track. There's going to be hospitality. It's a 2-day event, bunch of Lynx members going, and it's sponsored by Golf Breaks. So you're going to get a $200 golf trip voucher from Golf Breaks, and one lucky attendee is going to get a $2,000 credit for an epic golf getaway for you and your friends. So definitely sign up for that. I'll drop the link, linksdow.io/events. Really, really cool to see the Tree Farm wrapping up our year of signature events. Going to be very excited for that element. We touched on the Stack System Challenge. Definitely order soon so you get your baseline in. We're also going to do a spooky Lynx Millionaire drawing today. Halloween is coming right around the corner, so make sure you stack your Lynx coins, register your wallet in Discord before this evening when we do the drawing. And then I did also want to cover that our poll has closed on the best course designer of all time. Mackenzie edged out Donald Ross from our followers. We had a decent number of votes and views and dramatic replies saying that these 4 were not the only ones that should have been considered. Some big names popping in, CB McDonald and others. So if you have some strong opinions about this, definitely chime in the conversation. We're really excited to chat more about it. But yeah, Donald Ross, a popular pick, about a third of folks, and the GOAT of golf course design.
Does X limit you to 4 choices in a poll? I think that's true, right?
Yeah.
So, can't please everybody.
That is true, but glad to see the conversation. We're talking today about really 2 things. One, we're going to run down a little bit about what's happening in the world of golf, and then we're going to do a deep dive on Daddy Ross there. That's cringe as F. But yeah, I think as we talk about Hillcrest, one of the things that we're trying to do as much as possible is provide more context for sort of the club's history as we sort of move into present day, and obviously go through this renovation and open up this rejuvenated Ross gem in Kansas City. So let's dive into a little bit of golf news. Sadly, kind of one of my low-key favorite tournaments of the year is the Century. And part of that is because it happens in Kapalua, but it's also the timing of you get into this stretch towards February, and as a sports sicko in general, NFL is over. You have NBA basketball, you have the kind of the fun conference games in college basketball. Baseball's over, but golf has become such a central part, especially professional golf, but AM stuff too, but has become such a central part of my viewing schedule as a sports fan. And not having it, it's nice to get a little bit of distance from it. If it was every week, it probably would get a little old. But the off season, it's the perfect time to want to get right back into it. I remember the one when JJ Spawn had his shirt untucked. It was first time I fell in love with JJ Spawn, and just it being cold as hell here, but watching them play Kapalua and having it be warm there, and it's just always a really fun tournament. So sad news is it's officially been canceled at this point. The course seems to be in really, really rough shape, just given the weather that they've had out there. So hopefully that turns around. It's going to be a massive cost to get that course back in playing shape. But then, they also announced potentially the reopening of the course. So it's just kind of a lot of weird stuff swirling around Kapalua right now. But yeah, it is sad news that it's been canceled. I know there's been some rumors that they might play at Torrey Pines, which eventually they're just going to play every PGA Tour event at Torrey Pines. Probably the Masters at some point. Why not just keep the traveling circus permanently there? But any thoughts on the Century? Any thoughts on the news? How are we feeling about this?
Totally agree that I was bummed that it's getting canceled. It is a favorite. It's I think it's the first week of January every year, and it's always cold, rainy, or maybe snow on the ground here, and being able to look at a beautiful blue sky, warm palm trees, green grass screen playing golf is always a little heartwarming. So it's going to be a bummer to miss out on that. But yeah, it seems like it's, I mean, I think basically just the drought conditions were like, you know, it was too much. And then they've got it kind of getting back towards the condition that, you know, people would expect now, but it just was too tight of a time frame to get it to like PGA Tour level. Sounds like it was, I mean, it's kind of unfortunate. I think they announced like the cancellation of the tournament and then literally the next day announced that they were reopening the course soon, which was like a little awkward. But you know, it's a bummer. Gonna be missed. But you know, we'll still get the West Coast swing and all that and some more warm weather golf, but this was always a highlight.
Yeah. And as JD in the comments says, like, it's also, I know last year, you know, with the fires and everything, like, it's also a big tournament for local, like, anytime a tournament comes to town, obviously it has an impact on the local economy, but it's kind of always had, I think, at least what I've seen and read and heard, an ethos of like really investing in that area whenever they bring that tournament to town. So like, not to mention like the golf course, and hopefully that golf course comes back, but that tournament itself, it's going to have a pretty big impact on the economy and the locals there. So there's a big bummer for sure. Another thing that was added to the list here, Michael Brennan, I'm sure a name that all of us are super duper familiar with, but the Utah Championship was fun. And I think like most notably, he just absolutely striped the ball off the tee. You see in the tweet that Cooper is showing here, the best strokes gained off the tee week in all of 2025, inclusive of Bryson, inclusive of Rory, inclusive of Scotty, like just absolutely demolished the golf ball. You know, obviously accuracy and length. It's in Utah, so there's some elevation there, obviously, but you know, strokes gained should control for everyone having that same advantage, right? So just an unbelievable week of driving the golf ball, and may he be the patron saint of all of our stack improvement over the offseason. But just great. And it's a really fun course to watch on TV. I don't know if you checked out the tournament, but I tuned in a little bit. It's a fun, they also have it on TrackMan. So it's like always fun to like play the course, watch it on TV, and see how much more poorly I do than they do, obviously. But yeah, shout out to Michael Brennan.
Yeah, I wasn't able to catch too much of it, but is a very cool scene, that kind of environment to be playing golf, a little different than the run-of-the-mill PGA Tour week. And yeah, Michael Brennan, I would say just like an aspirational smooth swing, like smooth yet fast swing, just crushing the ball. Mm-hmm. It's you know, good looking swing there. I saw one tweet that was it showed like I don't know if these were actual, you know, in chronological order of how he hit them, but it's just like, you know, he started off hitting a drive at like 330 or whatever, and just like every drive there were like 10 in a row that were just longer and longer and longer. And I think he had one that was like 415 or something, I'm sure downhill or whatever. But yeah, just wild, just crushing the ball, and doesn't look like he's even trying. So absolutely aspirational stack system training goals coming from that.
Yeah,
for sure.
Like Oberg, but with even higher ball speeds. I mean, that's some high praise there for Brennan.
Yeah, you just gotta love it. Just like how much speed is generated right from that like drop to through. Like, I'd love to have that move. Let's also touch on the internet invitational before we get into Donald Ross. So, I think it's very easy to sort of poke fun at this, but I do think it's notable from like a media standpoint, because it's a massive event to pull off, right? And I think as like YouTube golf has mostly succeeded from the standpoint of individual creators videoing themselves play golf, each with their own niche, right? So you have like Bob Does Sports, they do the fun, irreverent, you know, drink a beer a hole, see how they can score in a scramble. They're, you know, worst golfers but best personalities, and they're really entertaining. Obviously good, you know, especially over the last year, you know, has better golfers playing golf in different formats, but there's now so many creators that the Internet Invitational, what's interesting to me is that over the last 2 years, the PGA Tour has recognized creators by doing the Creator Classic, or like elevating YouTube golf into a broadcast medium. But like, I would have to guess that this is going to perform better than any of those. And it's completely on YouTube, right? The first episode is on Bob the Sports Channel. I think the second one is going to be on Barstool. So it's fascinating to see like the production value and probably the reach, I would have to guess, of something like this being completely YouTube native without the help of other golf organizing bodies, right? So to me, that's super fascinating. The format is also, go ahead.
Oh, I was going to ask. So the format of this one, they actually played a while ago, right? But then they're releasing episodes, episodic kind of,
Yeah, they recorded it. It's at Big Cedar Lodge. All the stuff is already done. So it's fun. Like they're all under embargo. They all have NDAs. They can't talk about the results until it happens on TV. So they're releasing it now. And the episode, like people are poking fun on the length of it. It was like 3 hours, which is a long ass time. But like, look, a golf tournament's longer than that. And I think that I would love to have access to the dashboard, their YouTube dashboard, just to see what the reach and engagement is like. But yeah, I mean, I fast forwarded some of the stuff, but like, and the beginning kind of lagged, but like it almost plays like a reality show. Like it's almost like a precursor to Good bringing back Big Break, which is going to be, I hope, good. But like they picked captains, and then the captains did a snake draft on which players. Then there's 2 teams. One of those teams gets eliminated based on how they play a match play on day 1. There is drama with Luke Kwan sleeping through his alarm and not showing up, and so what's the guy's name from Barstool? Not Big Cat, but the other guy. No, on the actual I don't know. I'm not as deep in this stuff as I should be, but he was paired with Luke Kwan, who Luke Kwan is obviously an excellent golfer. And because Luke Kwan was late, he had to play 5 of the 9 holes by himself. Like Luke Kwan just had to stand there. And then finally Luke Kwan could play. And obviously they lost because they were down. They were dormy by the time he touched a club. But yeah, I mean, his stuff is weird and it's a little cringe and whatever, but I honestly I'm kind of here for it. It was weird to see all these individual personalities coming together. I was telling my wife, it was almost like the Avengers. Like you just got it's weird to see all these different people interact with each other. But I liked it. I mean, I would, as someone who watches YouTube pretty much exclusively as my television, if sports aren't on, I found myself enjoying this. So,
yeah. And so they only show the first few holes this episode, and then they'll kind of sequentially do it. Is that kind of the deal?
So they showed my understanding, they showed the first day. So they, it was basically a series of 9-hole matches between, again, team versus team, based on the drafted pairings. And then they'll eliminate one of the teams, and then they'll continue through the rest of these episodes. So until they're playing for like $1 million. I think the final sort of groups, I think there's maybe 3 people in a match, if I understand correctly, and each of them will get like a third of that. But it's, significant money. They have big name sponsors. They had like a Dunkin' pop up on the first tee that you could drive through as you're walking to the first tee. Again, some of this stuff is silly, but I think to me, again, the interesting thing and the reason why I'm bringing it up is because I was pretty fascinated to see them basically do this outside of any broadcast support. And that I think has to give them some leverage as they move into some of this Creator Classic stuff. The PGA Tour still wants to capitalize on this zeitgeist. I don't know if they need it anymore, is kind of my speculation.
Yeah. I mean, that's kind of been the thing all along, right? Every creator brings their own audience. And so they're a little less dependent on the usual media distribution apparatus. And that's kind of part of it, right? It's more like, the PGA Tour trying to leverage that as well. Just looking at some of the numbers, the last couple of Creator Classic videos, the last one at Eastlake was 500,000 views. The one before that at TPC Sawgrass was 1.2 million. This is already at 1.7 million in a day. Yep. So, that is indicative for sure. Mm-hmm. Not completely apples to apples maybe, but yeah, definitely interesting to see how all of it evolves. And also, this is more like the way this is done. The Internet Invitational is a little more on like, I would say the sweet spot of all the creators, right? Like it's edited, as probably has a little more production value. It's not like a live commentated thing like the Creator Classic is, which always felt a little weird, or
Correct.
is like catching all these creators or influencers a little bit out of their element almost. Whereas this is, a little more seems like right up their alley. So, would expect it to do pretty well. So yeah, I mean, it's going to be interesting to see how it all evolves and, maybe evolves into something bigger, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, I think that's exactly right. Like the thing that I liked about it was that it wasn't live. It wasn't commentated. It was just them, like, and there was a lot of also like, obviously there was the golf stuff, but they did a good job of, arguably a better job than like NBC does at like actually following the action. Like it was pretty clear it was happening. They did a really good job on the graphics. They did a really good job of like jumping into different matches at the right time. And that's what their sweet spot is. Like none of them do live stuff, right? So like they didn't attempt to, which I think is good. And there's no reason to, right? Because they know they don't need it. So like it's edited well. For a 3-hour video, I probably fast forwarded about an hour of it, to be honest. But like for a 3-hour video to watch 2 hours of it, I was pretty surprised by how locked in I was.
Yeah, I mean, it also feeds right into the kind of clipping elements too. If you have 3 hours to kill and you put it on in the background, that's great. But you have these moments that work really, really well for social clips, right? And that small attention span, you drive some traffic back. Portnoy has been doing this for a decade plus, right? Like he's been really locked in on this kind of thing. Bob Does Sports is excellent on that type of recorded content game. So to see them collaborating to kind of host this is really good. And I we'll definitely be checking it out.
Yep. Yeah. I mean, that's another really good point, right? Like they know how to do this better than anyone. And like they all day yesterday, it was the main character of golf Twitter yesterday, right? Like the people, slamming on Luke Kwan with like them creating a fake beef because of that. And then like they just get so much multimedia tread on stuff that comes out of these videos. It's just pretty fascinating. Like it or not like it, it's very, very interesting in the direction that this is headed. All right, well let's dive into the main segment here. We're going to talk about Donald Ross. I'm not going to say Daddy Ross again. So, again, like this is a very famous name. Like everyone, if you've heard about golf course, you've probably heard about Donald Ross. The connection here is obviously that Donald Ross was the architect for Hillcrest Country Club in Kansas City. And so almost as an exercise in us learning ourselves as we continue to like research the lore of the club and everything else, we thought it was a good idea to just provide a little bit more context on him and his legacy, because that legacy is intimately connected to the legacy of Hillcrest, right? So some of this stuff you might already know, some of it you won't, but the hope is that by doing this, we can educate a little bit about who he is, how he approached golf course design, what his legacy was, and what that means for Hillcrest, which is obviously important to all of us. So to start off, Chris, just give us sort of a backdrop. Who was Donald Ross as a man?
As a man, that kind of ups the bar a little bit, but I'll tell you who he was as a golf course architect. Maybe.
There you go.
Well, I mean, he was obviously one of the kind of top architects of the age, right? And what many people term like the golden age. So one of the best periods for golf course creation. He was one of the best guys, golf course architects, and obviously he was near the top. There's a lot of really big names in that era. McKinsey, Colton Allison over on the UK side, and McDonald and Rayner and all these others were operating in this time period. But Donald Ross was one of those big names. And so he was, it's funny kind of the different ties he ends up having to us, but he was born in Dornoch, Scotland, just down the road from Spey Bay, area that we have ended up spending a lot more time in than certainly a few years ago. But so he was born there. He kind of worked at the club and, was a greenskeeper, club maker, pro, all these things, and then ended up emigrating to the US in 1899. So, and he got his first job at Oakland Country Club, but then very quickly, like within the first year of being in the US, he was appointed the golf pro at Pinehurst, which was like kind of from there, the rest was history, right? He's like, he designed all of the Pinehurst courses essentially, plus a bunch of others in the area. And that kind of set him on the path to being, creating all of the great courses that we know today and, being one of the most renowned golf course architects. But yeah, so he's like born Scotsman, but, emigrated to America and ended up being one of the top golf course architects in the game. One of the things, just as I was doing a little research, I found interesting was he basically juggled playing professionally and being an architect for like over a decade. Like basically, it's kind of, at least in my mind, I had thought of, Donald Rossi's just one of the best architects in the world. He came over, he designed a bunch of courses. That was his thing. But it was very clearly like he was doing whatever he could to make ends meet. I'm sure it was a situation where he's like, he's playing, he was a club pro, he was playing as a professional, and then he took on some, golf course design contracts or whatever, and then ended up turning into the biggest thing. But like, so from like 1900 to 1910, he was basically playing as a pro. Like he had 5 top 10s in the US Open. Just in the 6-year span from 1902 to 1907, which is wild. He finished 6th in 1903. In 1910, he like didn't play the US Open because he was going to the UK on a kind of like a scouting trip or maybe a work trip as an architect. And then he placed 8th in the Open Championship, like very clearly a good player. But yeah, it's kind of funny that I didn't personally know that piece of the history, but he was basically living in Pinehurst, at least during the winter, designed basically all of those courses, or at least the first 3 in that decade, and Southern Pines and, some others, while still playing professional. And he was still kind of a part-time architect while he was already designing some of these, like, what end up being world-renowned courses, in the first decade of the century, which is
has
wild.
to be on the Mount Rushmore playing architects, right? Like it's like Crenshaw winning the Masters after Sandhills came out. You know what I mean? So it's like Crenshaw is probably number 1, 1-2 Masters, but then Ross has to be on it.
I mean, like
old
Tom Morris or whatever.
Of course, that's Mount Rushmore, right? 3 of the 4.
Some blurred, I guess, more blurred lines back in the day, right? Like Crenshaw doing it in the modern era, maybe a different ball game. But yeah, I mean, is definitely a talented, well-rounded guy for sure.
Yeah, but that's like one of the fascinating parts about sort of this era in history, right? Is like most of these dudes didn't specialize because the money wasn't there to do it, right? Like they had to, like later on, like, think about like Tom Bendelow is sort of in the same era and has a similar sort of oeuvre of like lots of golf courses. Like most of his payment came from Spalding, right? Spalding hired him to design a bunch of golf courses so they could increase demand for golf clubs and golf balls, right? Like, because there just weren't enough places to play. Ross, it's not a surprise that these guys did everything from professionals at clubs to playing pros to building golf clubs to building golf courses, right? Like there wasn't as much depth in the profession at that point.
Yeah, totally. I mean, my understanding, just reading through some of the history, is like Ross was doing that to make ends meet, and then he basically only made the transition to being a full-time architect when he essentially was like sponsored or had a donor. This guy Joseph Wyckoff in Massachusetts that like basically funded him, which is kind of wild. Just gave him a little bit of a footing to have some more security and work out of this club, Mount Tom Golf Club in Massachusetts, but then also have more security to like, okay, like I don't need to play tournaments to make ends meet. Like I can focus on this one thing, which is wild to think about, right? This is like happening in like 1912 or whatever it was, like after he's already built Pinehurst No.2, Pinehurst No.1, 2, and 3, and Southern Pines, and Essex County Club, and he's like already done this stuff that would end up being world-renowned courses, but he still wasn't even doing that full time. Just really crazy to think about.
Yeah, when I was reading the Kansas City Star, some of the reporting, it was a big deal when Donald Ross came to Kansas City. Like it was newsworthy that like people knew who he was. And part of kind of the early sells when they created Hillcrest Country Club, there was a pre-existing club that was on a different plot of land, and they basically just built that golf course himself, right? They're just like, golf seems cool. Let's build the first golf course in Kansas City. I think this ended up being the second one. And then the reason why it's called Hillcrest, side note, is because when they did the surveying of the land, it was the largest or the highest point in the county. And so they called it Hillcrest for that reason. But like there were multiple newspaper articles written about Donald Ross coming out. And there was fanfare. Like, I'm sure he was taken out to dinner and he was a mini celebrity, but like they were attaching Donald Ross's name to that golf course in 1912. And even then they were reporting that I think he had like 7 or 8 projects happening at the same time. He said that he was employing dozens, if not 100 people around the country building these golf courses. And as you kind of see in some of these, and we're going to talk about the golf courses, once he went to an area, he would build a bunch, right? While you're there, most of the cost is going to come from travel. That's probably getting covered by the people who bring him out to do it. But like in Western New York, for example, there's, obviously there's Oak Hill, there's also Irondequoit, and there's also Country Club of Buffalo. All are Donald Ross's courses that he laid out at the exact same time. But, very, very interesting and different in that profession.
Yeah. And he was, I think in terms of like what his legacy is or what he's known for, I mean, he was a very prolific architect. Like I'm pretty certain he designed more courses than any other like main architect of the time. I think he's credited with over 400 either designs or redesigns, or just kind of having a significant involvement on these courses, which is a really big number. Part of that's just because he was he was around for a long time. He was kind of designing courses from 1900 to like 1945 when he died, and some of the other names of the time did unfortunately like pass away early, or like a Seth Rayner, or some of the others, and didn't have like the time period to work over. But part of that was certainly, once he had established himself, he did have a really big firm like you were talking about. And later in his design life, like he had a lot of projects going. So it was interesting to look at like the timeline of his chronology and him designing courses, and like Hillcrest fit into that, and just kind of everything else that was going on in the world. Because you can see, he started off in like 1900 to 1910. He had a handful of things that he was doing, right? Like he designed the 3 Pinehurst courses, then Southern Pines down the road. And, he'd have maybe like 1 to 3 courses he was working on a year. He designed Overhills in the Pinehurst area in 1910. This is one of my favorite stories. We'll have to save that for another podcast, but it's this kind of lost to history course in the Pinehurst area. But he did that for a while, and then he clearly business started to pick up, and so from like 1912 to 1917-ish, he's it was kind of his first peak, if you want to call it, where he's working on 10 to some years upwards of 20 courses at a time. And this is like a lot of the most renowned courses that he worked on, or at least first worked on, were in this period, right? So like Pinehurst No.4, and then Eastlake, Old Elm, Glens Falls, Plainfield. He actually was, I think, the original architect at Philly Cricket in their Flowertown location. Wano, like all of these spots, and you can keep going down the list. Newport, Ridgewood, I guess Country Club, like all of these were done in that same period. Which I think looking back, this is like maybe his best period of production, or like highest quality. The most big name courses came out of it. And so it's wild to think that like that's when he made Hillcrest, right? Like that's when he designed Hillcrest, visited in 1912, like right at the beginning of the period, and course opened at, the end of 1915, like right in the middle of when all these iconic courses were designed by him at the same time. And so like, literally when he made the statement of Kansas City having the finest course in the world, like, whatever you make of that statement, or, it being bluster or whatever, like that's after he designed Pinehurst No.2, and, after he designed Old Elm and Plainfield, and, all these other really great courses, and like Oakland Hills, Ryder Cup venue, major championship venue, was open like right along the same time frame as Hillcrest. Really wild to think about, and just kind of awesome company to be in, like as a course, as a design.
Yeah, we're getting him at like his Revolver era Beatles peak, right? It's like maybe pre, like I think there's some Sgt. Pepper's, maybe there's some Abbey Road, maybe there's some White Album, but like this is Pinehurst No.2 is kind of like the Rubber Soul, shot through the universe. You get the beginning of the changes for the Beatles, but like we're at his peak of powers here for sure.
So I just nerded out for a second. I was like, wait, when was the Model T invented? And it's 1908. And so I'm looking at his travels, right? And kind of like at the beginning, before 1910, you're still like 50-50 if you're going to take a horse or like a motor car anywhere, right? Like talk about going over to England. He's playing the Open because you can't fly back. It's a 3-month, crossing of the Atlantic to do this. Now he can get to Ohio in a car, right? So I think a lot of the ability for him to travel around and see all these new properties and lay out these courses owed a lot to like the machinery and infrastructure for like transport, right?
Yeah.
Like I think this is
trains too, or huge at this point. Like you notice a lot of these clubs are on train lines because the members needed a way to get out. Like East Lake is a good example of that, but Oak Hill.
Yeah, I mean Pinehurst, the whole Pinehurst operation was basically, at least my understanding, it was like set up as a winter retreat for families, wealthy folks that lived in the north would take the railroad down, and that was at like the railroad junction, and they built a resort there. Like it all built around train travel, because that's what there was at the time. Certainly around that like 1900 period, but that opened up later for sure.
Yeah, you can't avoid, like, to your point, Coop, like the impact of this like moment in the Industrial Revolution has on golf in general, because there's more money, right? The economy is growing. Spoiler alert, the late 20s, early 30s, we're going to run into some fans there. But like right now, like even again, like look at like the composition of the Hillcrest membership. Like to bring back up GL Conley was a middle manager at a plate glass company, right? That place would not exist without the growth and development of, architecture, transportation, everything else. And you see these clubs, they pop up in very specific places where people have the disposable income and the time and leisure to be able to go and spend 4 hours doing something like golf, right? So it's like this moment in time, the reason why you see so like the golden age of golf at this moment in time is because of those factors for sure.
Yeah. The other way that plays in is like, Donald Ross, I think it's fair to say, was known for like the naturalness of his designs. Didn't rely much on, moving a ton of dirt. A lot of that's because it was really hard to do so at that time, right? You're like literally working with horses and, kind of, very crude implements. You aren't driving tractors around and, backhoes and things like that. Although, some of his contemporaries like, McDonald and Rayner still did a lot more of that, like, kind of less natural play. But that was certainly kind of a hallmark of what Ross was known for, and that was part of it, right? So you go to sites and like at Hillcrest and say, okay, this land is, reminds me of my home in Dornoch in Scotland, and we're using the features of the land to make hazards and find the holes and make them interesting to play, and that's kind of how he thought about it. And part of that probably because he had a limited ability to just design stuff out of nothing, right? Like he had to work with the land and figure out the best way to do that, and just give him the time.
But I think like as we kind of transition into him at Hillcrest, I think that like I think part of the reason why he's so appreciated by modern architects too, right? Is because most of the modern architecture game, like when I say modern, I mean the like kind of fried eggification of like who the accepted pantheon of great architects are now. They think about land the same way, right? 100 years later, plus they're like, instead of, okay, well, we have a property here we want to put a bunch of houses on, so let's try to manufacture a golf course out of a flat piece of land in Florida. Versus like you look at Seminole, which is Donald Ross, which is also in Florida, is a much more interesting piece of land than 99% of the golf courses in Florida. And he found interesting holes out there that have stood the test of time. So I think like part of the reason why he's so appreciated, I would hazard to guess, is that what you just said, Chris, is the same way that people think about it now. When you look at like Tree Farm, to bring up an example, is like they found the land first, then they built a golf course on that land that made sense to the land. You look at Rodeo Dunes, they spent years trying to find sandy land throughout the United States, just with a cup of coffee on Google Maps, trying to find a place that had interesting holes already on it. And then it's just the architect's job to bring those holes to life. And hearing him talk about it in the newspaper in 1912 is like, it echoes that completely. It's like, look, yeah, there's 18 great holes out here. I'm going to show you where the hole is and you have to get to it. And this property makes that very, very hard. And I want to punish you.
It is also interesting. You know, I think some of these things evolve over time, just historically. Like I know this has been this kind of evolution in how his work has been interpreted has been cited before, I think by Ron Whitten. But like, so at Pinehurst No.2, he's like known for the domed greens or whatever. But I think the kind of consensus now is like that actually just happened over time. Like he didn't do that himself. You know, it just happens with you know, sanding and overseeding and everything over time. And like you know, some of that stuff evolves. You know, what is there today may be different than what he designed in the first place. We talked a little bit about that, like when we were going through the Hillcrest routing last time, right? Like, you know, the land is evolving and changing, and sometimes you have to kind of uncover what the original design or design intent was, because it does evolve over time. But it's funny seeing some of those stories like the domed greens at Pinehurst, or the other crazy thing just that I feel like people don't really think about these days, and was, you know, found in the research, was so like in the South where, you know, grass growing conditions were not as ideal, they had oiled sand greens at Pinehurst until like the 30s. You know, like the first, you know, however many decades that they were playing at Pinehurst, they were playing on oiled sand greens, which is like, you know, you're putting on sand essentially, right? Like completely different game than what we would consider now. And, you know, Ross was actually instrumental in transitioning the greens there to grass once they basically like discovered Bermuda grass, or kind of, I guess, cultivated it to the point where they could, you know, get a good playing surface for golf. But, you know, it's those things that no one ever thinks about that today, right? Like that, oh yeah, when he designed the course, he actually designed a sand green golf course, and completely changed over time. And that's obviously much different than what was there today. But, you know, all this stuff is evolving, and, you know, things change over time. And part of what I found interesting, like with the Hillcrest history, is like, especially later in his career, he was, I think it's fair to say, like kind of known for, his firm had a ton of work. Like, you know, some years they were doing upwards of like 30, 35 courses in a year that they were working on. Once you get into like the 20s and the late 20s, again, which is like boom times, you know, hadn't gotten to the Depression or World War II yet. So they were working on a ton of courses. And so, you know, a lot of those in that time, Ross was spending kind of a sparing amount of time at, or, you know, he might go and design it and then not revisit it ever. Or, you know, you see some of these stories, even like as we were searching for courses throughout the US, you know, you'd see some courses that are like kind of Donald Ross in name only, almost, you know, they like kind of hung their hat on that. But
yeah, Shelby Golf Course in Nashville is like exactly what you just described, where basically even on the Donald Ross Society website, it lists Shelby Golf Course as a Donald Ross course. He did plans for a golf course on that property. They did not build that golf course. Tom Bendelow came back out a couple years later, but it's so confusing to trace some of this, like the legacy of some of the stuff because of that, because records were worse. But to your point, like Hillcrest, like we know he was there because the Kansas City Star talked about it, right? And they made a big deal about him being out there multiple times. And part of that is, I think what you're getting to is, they knew they were they built the first golf course, they laid it out and members played it. But there was always an intention from the very beginning to have big tournaments there. Back to GL Conley won the Trans-Mississippi. That was a national event. You had people coming in from everywhere to play in that golf tournament. And then the Western Am in 22, they put in at least what the Kansas City Star would call a sufficient sum of money. Who knows how much that is? But they brought him back out to basically doctor the course for the Western Am. And like what we would think about now, like something that like Reese Jones would have done for a US Open, came back out to get it ready for the Western Amateur, because at that point, the Western Amateur was effectively a major, right? Like completely different golf landscape then. But it was a big national tournament. You had big names coming in. And the entire social fabric of Kansas City was obsessed with the Western Am for a month. I mean, there's newspaper articles about it every day. And bringing Donald Ross back out there again, paying him to be out there, paying him and his crew to update the course, was to make sure that the Western Am was going to go off as a notable tournament.
Right. Yeah. So like in the late 20s time frame, it's probably it's probably rare to see Ross do that type of thing, but Hillcrest, I think, is fortunate in that caught him in that first wave of brilliance, right, where he was doing a ton of great designs, but not working on as many courses as he was before, and then had the good fortune of having him visit like in 1912, working on the course 1912 to 1915 when it opened, and then having him come back and do a second round. So he's actually spending a lot of time on the course, on the design, seeing how it played for close to a decade, or at least a number of years, and then putting new design elements in it, or making tweaks to it. So it actually got a lot of attention from him, which is, I think, a good thing, just kind of for the historical legacy, and knowing that he was actually putting a lot of thought and energy into it, whereas some of the courses certainly that were later in his career, you might not be able to say that about later on when he was taking a lot more work on. So that was very cool to see. And yeah, like you said, he kind of original design in 1912, or original visit, and then came back in 21 in advance of the 1922 Western Am. Yeah, it was really interesting to kind of see the ebbs and flows of his career, right? There's like that peak in the early and mid teens, and then his career was so long that you see like all of the macro and world geographic cycles like evidencing itself in his coursography, because he had that period during the mid-teens where he's making all these great courses, designing all these great courses, and then slows down towards the end of the decade because of World War I. Then boom times in the 20s. He's working on a ton of courses, a fair number of the big name, courses that he made, Oak Hill, Seminole, Ronimink, all these came in that time period.
This is like early 90s Tom Hanks, right? Like the run that, like, to Bill Simmons, like the run that Donald Ross was on in the 20s to go Mid Pines to Makwana, Oak Hill. By the way, while doing 30 courses a year, basically, and then do Lancaster, Pine Needles, Ronimink, and Seminole. What a run, man. Like that's insane.
Goated.
Yeah. But it's funny though, just the ebbs and flows, right? Like those are the boom times, and then boom, Great Depression. It's like, the kind of work slowed to a trickle through the 30s, then, picked up a little bit in the 40s, but obviously then there was World War II. And so, it's kind of wild to just kind of see all the macro stuff happening as well. But yeah, well, you've now successfully related him to the Beatles and Tom Hanks, so that's good company there.
Hey, we're multidisciplinarians here at the Lanes Golf Club podcast. I do have I think I might be the only person who enjoyed this conversation, so I'm not going to open it up now. But I was thinking, I want to figure out a way to trace the like most important albums of the last 150 years with the most important golf courses. So watch this space. I have some ideas, but I think I might have to have that conversation on a solo pod. But yeah, what else? Like, so you've taken us into kind of the Great Depression, like you said, boom bust cycles, World War II. Kind of carry us to the end, and like what else is there to say here? Because I do want to touch before we sort of wrap up on like what Hillcrest is going to look like in the future, which obviously we're going to do a ton of pods on that as well. Like you wanted to set the historical context, and then we'll sort of break down what it looks like in the future. But what else is there to say here, Chris? You did most of the research here, so I'm going to let you cook a little bit more.
Yeah. And I don't know that I have too much to say. We kind of went through the full span of the coursography there, but obviously he was one of the greats, and was a prolific designer, one of the best designers. Also, we should give a shout out to Tyler Ray, by the way. So current golf course architect, whose website Coop has up on the screen. He's as what I found to be one of the best Donald Ross histories, interestingly enough. So shout out to Tyler. But obviously one of the greats, and yeah, it's interesting. My main takeaways were that he had these kind of ebbs and flows in different time periods, and it was awesome to see that Hillcrest was basically, like we said, in that first peak, you might call it, when like the bulk of his really renowned courses that stood the test of time were designed. And so like that is incredible company to be in, and very cool to think about Hillcrest in that context, right? Of among those other courses as company. And yeah, I mean, the other, maybe just to tie it all out, like we had the poll, right? We put the poll out. Hey, who do you think the best golf course architect is? And, McKinsey was the highest pick, and then Donald Ross second. But it is wild to think that, like, I think 10 of the Golf Digest top 100 courses today are Donald Ross designs, like 10% of them, which I think, doing this off the top of my head, but I think that's a higher number than McKinsey's, right? Like he has some that people know a lot about, like Cypress and Augusta and what have you. But just the fact that Donald Ross did so many of these awesome designs that still, 100 years later are kind of recognized as the top courses in the country or in the world. Really amazing, and kind of a testament to the design chops that he had, and everything that he built over what ended up being a really long and prolific career.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I think that, like, to round out this, I think that's what makes the Hillcrest project so exciting, right? Is because like most of those clubs that you described that have retained their quality and memory and legacy over time is because the clubs have, right? Hillcrest is a little bit of a different story. Like over the last 100 years, Hillcrest fell into a state in which it really wasn't one of those clubs. It wasn't in that tier. It wasn't like it was a public course. It had less investment. And I think, like, obviously there's always worry when you take a Golden Age Architects golf course and do work on it at all. But like, I think the thing that I'm most excited about is that it's very clear the team has sort of internalized this concept of Donald Ross looked at that land and knew it was special, knew that a golf course deserved to be on it, and a great golf course deserved to be on it. And the approach is obviously, like, we talked about last week, flipping the nines and making some changes here or there. But I think the idea is to ensure that if he was looking at that land in 2025 with modern equipment, modern palette, and everything else, like, what would it look like to do respect to Donald Ross's legacy? And I think looking at the routing and all the continued conversations we're going to have about Hillcrest's future, it's really exciting, not only to inherit this legacy, but also to drive it forward.
100%. be exciting to see it all evolve and kind of come to life, or come back to life, as it were.
Yeah, for sure. Can't wait to beat GL Conley's personal best there. Coming for you, GL. All right. Well, that's all for this week. Appreciate everyone for tuning in, watching, listening, whatever medium you engaged on. Remember, check out Hillcrest memberships, everything that we're talking about right now. You can be a member of that club. And if you're a Links Down member, you can simply visit clubhouse.links.golf and learn all about Hillcrest. We're happy to talk to you about it. It's going to be a great club. It's going to build upon this legacy, and you have an opportunity not only to follow along and watch that happen, but also be a member there. So if you're interested in that, reach out, and also check out Instagram, YouTube. Make sure you subscribe. Make sure you turn that notification on. We're really ramping up as we get into the next couple of months here on just a ton of content about Hillcrest and also about Spey Bay. But you can check that out on Instagram and YouTube, and you're going to see all of that stuff. And as always, if you have any guest ideas, hot takes, feedback, please let us know in Discord. We love hearing from you. We take that stuff very seriously. And so, yeah, follow the pod, leave a review, and we will see y'all next time. Appreciate it.
Grab your stack system, get a baseline in, come do the challenge with us.
Let's get fast. Y'all.
Let's do it. Thanks, guys.
See y'all.
Bye.